The ancient star of Zephyr Prime flickered like a dying candle in the darkness of space. Its light, once brilliant enough to warm 3 planets, now barely reached the frozen surface of the Zephyrian homeworld. Ice covered the great crystal cities that had stood for 10,000 years. The proud spires that once touched the clouds now lay buried under endless snow. Admiral Kethfer pressed his 4 hands against the cold metal of the observation window. Aboard the massive evacuation ship, Eternal Dawn. Below him, the last transport vessels lifted off from the dying world, carrying the final groups of refugees to safety. His scaled face reflected the dim light of their failing sun, and his 4 eyes held the weight of loss that no words could describe. "Sir, the final count is complete," said Lieutenant Morthick, approaching with a data pad clutched in his 6-fingered hands. 8 billion souls evacuated. The homeworld is now empty. Kethfer did not turn from the window. He watched as another transport ship rose from the surface, its engines glowing bright against the white wasteland that had once been their capital city. 8 billion, he repeated quietly. From 12 billion just 5 years ago, Lieutenant's scales turned a darker shade of blue, the Zephyrian equivalent of sadness. "The cold claimed many before we could reach them, sir. The outer colonies fell silent months ago, I know." Kethfer's voice was heavy with the pain of command. He had made the hard choices, deciding which cities to evacuate first, which settlements to abandon to the growing ice.
Ow.
Every decision had cost lives. Every delay had meant more deaths. The star outside pulsed weakly, its nuclear fire sputtering like a torch running out of fuel. The Zephyrian scientists had been clear in their reports. The star's core was collapsing. The fusion reactions that had burned for billions of years were failing. Nothing could stop it. Nothing could save it. "Signal the colony worlds," Kethfer ordered, finally turning away from the window. "Tell them that Zephyr Prime sleeps forever." Morthick hesitated. "Sir, perhaps we should say something more hopeful. The people in the colonies need something. To believe in hope?" Kethfer's scales flashed red with anger. "Hope is what killed 4 billion of our people. Hope made them wait too long to evacuate. Hope made them think the scientists were wrong, that somehow our star would recover." He walked to his command chair, his movements slow and tired. "No, Lieutenant. Hope is a luxury we can no longer afford." The bridge of the Eternal Dawn was filled with the quiet sounds of a dying civilization. Officers moved between their stations with the careful precision of people who had practiced emergency procedures too many times. The evacuation had taken 3 years to complete, and every person aboard had lost someone to the cold. "Sir," called out the communications officer, "we're receiving the final transmission from the surface monitoring station." "Put it through." The voice that came through the speakers was calm and professional, even though everyone knew the speaker would not survive the night. "This is Station Prime Base. Final transmission. All automated systems are shutting down. Core temperature has dropped below minimum operational levels. The homeworld monitoring network is now offline. It has been an honor to serve." The transmission ended with a soft click, and the bridge fell silent. Somewhere far below, the last Zephyrian on the homeworld had just died. Alone in the cold, Kethfer stood and walked to the tactical display, studying the positions of the evacuation fleet. Hundreds of ships stretched across the star system, carrying the survivors to distant colonies. The ships were beautiful, with their flowing lines and crystal components, but they looked fragile against the vast darkness of space. "Navigation. Set course for the Outer Rim colonies," he ordered. "We'll begin distribution of the refugees according to the settlement plans." "Yes, sir." "Estimated travel time is 6 months. 6 months to scatter his people across the galaxy like seeds in the wind. 6 months to watch them struggle to build new lives on alien worlds. 6 months to try to keep their culture alive when their heart had died." The young sensor officer at the far end of the bridge suddenly straightened. "Sir, I'm detecting something unusual." "What is it?" "Energy signatures, sir. Very faint, but approaching from the outer rim. The pattern doesn't match any known technology in our databases." Kethfer moved to the sensor station, his interest sparked. For the first time in days? Could it be raiders? A hegemony, perhaps? "No, sir. These readings are completely unknown." The energy output is massive, but the design signatures are crude, almost primitive. The admiral studied the readings with growing concern. The last thing his people needed was to encounter hostile aliens during their evacuation. The Zephyrian fleet was designed for exploration and colonization, not warfare. How long until they reach us? At current speed, approximately 18 hours, sir. Kethfer nodded slowly. Alert the fleet. Tell them we have unknown contacts approaching. Begin defensive formations, but do not power weapons unless I give the order. As the evacuation fleet prepared for the unknown, none of them realized that help was coming. Far away, in a different part of the galaxy, a human monitoring station had intercepted their distress signal. The approaching ships were not raiders or conquerors. They were rescuers. But that discovery would have to wait for another day. Captain Zerillan stood on the bridge of her cruiser Last Light, watching the long-range sensors with growing worry. Her ship was part of the rear guard, the last line of defense for the massive evacuation fleet that stretched across the Zephyr system. The dying star cast strange shadows on her blue-scaled face as she studied the tactical display. Captain, her sensor officer called out, his voice tight with concern. Those energy signatures are getting stronger. Whatever's coming, it's big. Zerillan moved to his station, her six-fingered hands gripping the console. The readings made no sense. The approaching vessels showed power outputs that should be impossible for ships of their apparent size. Any ships? Difficult to tell, ma'am. The energy interference from our dying star is making it hard to get clear readings. But I count at least 12 large vessels, maybe more. Configuration: unknown. They don't match anything in our databases. The design is ... strange, angular, crude-looking, but incredibly powerful. Zerillan felt a chill run down her spine. Her people had explored the galaxy for thousands of years, cataloging every known species and their technologies. Nothing should be completely unknown to them. Time to intercept. 14 hours at current speed. She turned to her communications officer. Any response to our standard first contact protocols? Nothing, Captain. But they're transmitting something. It's not directed at us, but we're picking up their internal communications. Can you decode it? The communications officer, a young female named Silera, shook her head. The language is completely unknown. The structure is unlike anything in our linguistic databases. But Captain, there's something else. The transmission patterns suggest they're talking about us. Zerillan's scales rippled with unease. How can you tell? They're using what sound like designation codes that match our fleet positions. And they keep repeating one word over and over. What word? We don't know what it means, but it sounds like gunships. Far away, on the bridge of the human vessel Prometheus. Admiral Lee Hyenwoo studied the alien fleet with fascination. The ships were beautiful, with smooth curves and what appeared to be crystal components that caught and reflected light in amazing ways. But they were clearly in distress. Communications? Any luck with the translation? He asked. Park Minho, the communications officer, looked up from his console with frustration. The language is incredibly complex, sir. Multiple tonal variations, and it seems to use mathematical concepts as part of basic grammar. But I think I'm making progress. What about their situation? From what I can tell, they're evacuating their entire star system. The star is dying, and they're trying to save their population. Lee nodded grimly. His science officer, Dr. Song-Ji Hai, had already analyzed the stellar data they'd collected. The alien star was indeed in its final death throes, and the evacuation fleet was massive. Billions of lives were at stake. Sir called out Lieutenant Commander Han Soo-jin from the tactical station. Their rear guard is taking defensive positions. I think they see us as a threat. Can't blame them, Lee replied. Unknown aliens appearing during their darkest hour. They probably think we're raiders. The human fleet looked very different from the elegant alien vessels. The ships were built for function over form, with thick armor plating and weapon systems that were clearly visible. To alien eyes, they would look aggressive and primitive. Admiral Park Min-ho said suddenly, I think I've got enough of their language to attempt basic communication. Do it. Park Min-ho activated the communication system and began speaking slowly and clearly. This is the United Earth Fleet. We are not hostile. We received your distress signal. Do you need help? On the last light, Solara jumped as the alien transmission came through. Captain, they're trying to communicate. Zarlin rushed to the communications station. What are they saying? The translation is rough, but I think they're asking if we need assistance. They mentioned something about a distress signal. Distress signal? We haven't sent any distress signals. Actually, ma'am, interrupted the sensor officer, we have. The automated emergency beacon has been transmitting continuously since we began the evacuation. It's possible they intercepted it. Zarlin stared at the display, showing the approaching human ships. They came because of our distress beacon. They crossed space to help us. It appears so, Captain. The idea was almost impossible to believe. In Zephyrian culture, species rarely helped each other without expecting something in return. Common but rescue missions between different species were almost unheard of. Open a channel, she ordered. Let's see what they want. The first conversation between humans and Zephyrians was awkward and full of translation errors. But slowly, both sides began to understand each other. The humans had indeed come to help, drawn by the distress signal that had been broadcasting across the galaxy. They say their name is Humanity, Solara reported, and they want to know if there's anything they can do to help with our evacuation. Zarlin looked at the tactical display, where the human fleet had stopped well outside weapon range, clearly trying to appear non-threatening. Asked them why they came. What do they want in return? The response came back quickly and left the entire bridge stunned. They say they came because someone needed help, and they were able to help. They don't want anything in return. They just want to know how they can assist. For the first time in months, Zarlin felt something she had almost forgotten existed. Hope. The meeting took place in the space between the two fleets, where human and Zephyrian ships floated side by side like strange metal flowers in the darkness. Admiral Li Huiyanwu stood in the communication chamber of his flagship, looking at the large screen that showed the alien leader for the first time. Admiral Kethfer was unlike anything humans had ever seen. His skin was covered in blue-green, scales that shifted color with his emotions, and his four eyes moved independently as he studied the human before him. When he spoke, his voice was deep and musical, translated by the communication computers into words Li could understand. I am Admiral Kethfer of the Zephyrian Republic, the alien said, his four hands moving in what appeared to be a formal greeting. You say, you came to help us. In our experience, help always comes with a price. Li remained calm, understanding the alien's suspicion. I am Admiral Li Huiyanwu of the United Earth Fleet. We received your distress signal and came as quickly as we could. The only price we ask is the chance to do what's right. Behind Li, Dr. Song Jihai studied the readings her team had gathered about the Zephyrian star. The numbers were worse than she had expected. The star was not just dying, it was collapsing, faster than their initial estimates suggested. Admiral, she whispered to Li, their star has maybe weeks left, not months. The fusion core is failing rapidly. Kethfer's scales turned a darker shade of blue as he heard the translation. Your scientist confirms what ours have told us. Our sun cannot be saved. 10,000 years of civilization will end with it. Maybe not, Li said quietly. The words hung in the air between them. On the Zephyrian side, several officers moved closer to their screens, their scales rippling with colors that indicated surprise and disbelief. Explain, Kethfer demanded. Chief Engineer Choi Yun-ha stepped forward. She had been studying the stellar data for hours, running calculations that seemed impossible even to her. Sir, if we could restart the fusion process in the star's core, we might be able to stabilize it. It's impossible, interrupted a new voice from the Zephyrian side. Dr. Velkorith, their chief stellar physicist, appeared on the screen. His scales were pale with age, but his eyes burned with intelligence. Have run every calculation. The core collapse cannot be reversed. The star is beyond salvation. Dr. Song Jihai moved to stand beside her admiral. Dr. Velkorath, we've studied your data. You're right that conventional methods won't work. But humans have developed fusion. Technology that might be able to force the reaction to restart. Force. Velkaroth's scales flashed yellow with confusion. You cannot force stellar fusion. The physics are absolute. We're very good at doing things that should be impossible. Lee said with a slight smile. It's what makes us human. Captain Kim Tae-ho, who had been listening quietly, stepped forward. Admiral, I've been running tactical simulations with my squadron. We modified our fusion torpedoes and coordinated with their stellar manipulation. Technology, we might be able to create a controlled fusion cascade. Kethver's 4 eyes focused on the human captain. You would risk your ships, your lives, for strangers? Yes, Kim replied simply, because it's the right thing to do. The communication chamber fell silent as both sides considered the proposal. The plan was dangerous beyond measure. If it failed, the explosion could destroy both fleets and any remaining life in the Zephyr system. The risk is enormous, Kethver said finally. If you fail, you could destroy what little remains of our world. And if we don't try, your people have no home to return to, Lee replied. That's not acceptable to us. Dr. Song Ji-hai began explaining the technical details to Dr. Velkaroth, their conversation quickly becoming too complex for the translators. The two scientists switched to mathematical equations, writing formulas in the air with their fingers. As the translation system struggled to keep up, your fusion technology is crude but incredibly powerful, Velkaroth admitted after an hour of discussion. You force nuclear reactions that should be impossible according to our understanding of physics. We learned long ago that impossible just means no one has figured out how to do it yet, Dr. Song replied. We specialize in finding ways to make the impossible happen. Chief Engineer Choi Yun-ha was already working with her Zephyrian counterpart, a female engineer named Silthara, to design the modifications needed for the plan. The two women found that despite their different species, they shared the same passion for solving seemingly impossible problems. Your people, Silthara said during a break in their work, they truly came here just to help us. With no thought of reward? That's who we are, Choi replied. When someone needs help and we can provide it, we don't ask questions. We just act. Remarkable, Silthara whispered, her scales shimmering with admiration. As the hours passed, the two fleets began working together as one. Human engineers shared their fusion technology, while Zephyrian scientists provided detailed knowledge of stellar manipulation. The language barriers slowly broke down as both species discovered they had more in common than they had. Differences. Admiral Li Huyanwu watched the joint effort with satisfaction. This was what humanity did best. He thought they didn't just bring weapons to solve problems. They brought hope, determination, and the absolute refusal to accept defeat. All ships, he announced to the combined fleet, prepare for the most ambitious rescue mission in galactic history. We're going to save a star. The joint engineering team worked without rest for 3 days straight. In the main laboratory of the human flagship, Dr. Song Ji-hai stood beside her new colleague, Dr. Velkaroth, both of them staring at calculations that covered every wall of the room. The math was beyond anything either species had attempted before. The fusion cascade? Will need to be perfect, Velkaroth said, his scales pale with exhaustion. One mistake and the star will explode instead of stabilize. Dr. Song nodded, her eyes red from lack of sleep. We've run the simulations 1,000 times. The timing has to be exact. Our fusion torpedoes hit the core at precisely the right moment, while your stellar manipulation fields guide the reaction. Chief Engineer Choi Yun-ha entered the laboratory carrying a modified fusion torpedo. The weapon, now twice its original size and covered in Zephyrian crystal components. This is it, she announced. It's the most powerful fusion device ever created. One torpedo contains enough energy to power a small city for a year, and we're going to fire 50 of them into our dying star, Velkaroth said, his voice filled with wonder and terror. Either we save our world, or we destroy it completely. Captain Kim Tae-ho was in the hangar bay inspecting his modified gunship. The vessel looked strange now, with Zephyrian technology integrated into its hull. Crystal arrays glowed along its sides, and the weapon systems had been completely rebuilt to carry the massive fusion torpedoes. Captain called out his weapons officer, Lieutenant Park Ji-1. The targeting systems are ready. We've practiced the attack run 50 times in simulation. And in real life, we only get one chance, Kim replied grimly. If we miss the target zone by even a few kilometers, the entire plan fails. Lieutenant Commander Han Soo-jin approached with a status report. Sir, all 12 attack ships are ready. The pilots know the risks. Kim nodded. Every pilot in the squadron had volunteered for the mission, knowing they might not survive. The attack run would take them dangerously close to the unstable star, where radiation levels could kill them in minutes, Kim said. Tell them we're not just carrying weapons, we're carrying hope. On the bridge of the last light, Captain Zarellan watched the preparations with amazement. The human ships were preparing to fly directly into the corona of their dying star, something no Zephyrian pilot would ever attempt. The radiation alone should kill them, but the humans seemed determined to make the impossible work. Captain, her sensor officer reported, the human attack formation is ready. They're requesting permission to begin the mission. Zarellan looked at the tactical display, where 12 human gunships waited in formation. Each ship carried enough firepower to destroy a small moon, and they were about to use it all to try to save a star. Permission granted, she said quietly.
Act.
And may the ancestors watch over them. Admiral Lee Hyen-woo stood in the command center, watching the countdown timer tick toward 0. Out. Around him, human and Zephyrian officers worked side by side, their differences forgotten in the face of the enormous task ahead. All ships report ready, announced Lieutenant Commander Han Soo-jin. The stellar manipulation fields are in position. Fusion torpedoes are armed and ready, reported Chief Engineer Choi Yun-ha. Targeting solutions confirmed, added Dr. Song Ji-hai. Lee looked at Admiral Kethfer, who stood beside him. The aliens' 4 eyes were fixed on the display showing their dying star. Are you ready, Admiral? Kethfer's scales shifted to a deep blue color. We have been ready to die for months. Now we are ready to live. All ships, this is Admiral Lee, came the voice over the communication system. We are about to attempt something that has never been done before. We are going to punch a hole in the laws of physics and force a star to live. Remember, we are not just carrying weapons, we are carrying the future of an entire civilization. Captain Kim Tae-ho felt his ship shudder as the engines pushed it toward the dying star. The temperature readings were climbing rapidly, and the radiation warnings were screaming. But he ignored them all, focusing only on the target zone in the star's core. Weapons hot, announced Lieutenant Park Ji-won. Target acquired, Fire Kim ordered. The first fusion torpedo streaked toward the star, its trail blazing like a comet. It struck the core exactly where the calculations said it should, and for a moment nothing happened. Then the second torpedo hit, and the third, and the fourth. The star shuddered. Energy readings are spiking, Dr. Song reported, her voice tight with excitement. The fusion reaction is beginning to stabilize. Stellar manipulation fields are holding, added Dr. Velkaroth. The cascade is spreading through the core. More torpedoes struck the star, each one adding to the growing fusion reaction. The dying light began to pulse with new energy, its color shifting from the dull red of a dying ember to the bright yellow of a healthy sun. It's working, breathed Admiral Kethfer, his scales now shimmering with colors that indicated joy and wonder. By the ancestors, it's actually working. The star's light grew brighter and brighter, washing over the frozen surface of Zephyr Prime. For the first time in years, the ice began to melt. Stellar readings are stabilizing, Dr. Song announced. The star is no longer collapsing. The fusion reaction is self-sustaining. The impossible had become possible. The dead star lived again. 3 days later, the star of Zephyr Prime blazed with a light that had not been seen in decades. Admiral Kethfer stood in the observation deck of the Joint Command Station, watching the golden rays touch the surface of his homeworld for the first time in years. The ice that had covered the great crystal cities was beginning to melt, revealing the beautiful architecture that had been hidden beneath the frozen wasteland. Beside him, Admiral Lee Hyen-woo smiled as he watched the transformation. The human fleet had taken losses during the mission. 2 gunships had been destroyed by the intense radiation and several others were heavily damaged. But the sacrifice had been worth it. An entire civilization had been saved. Your people paid a heavy price for this miracle, Kethfer said, his voice filled with gratitude. Captain Kim Tae-ho and his crew gave their lives to save a world they had never seen. Lee nodded solemnly. Captain Kim's ship had been caught in a solar flare during the final moments of the mission, but he had refused to retreat until the last torpedo was fired. His final transmission had been simple: mission accomplished. Star lives. Kim knew the risks, Lee replied. He chose to take them because he believed in what we were doing. That's what makes us human. Dr. Song Ji-hai approached with a data tablet, her face bright with excitement. Admirals, the stellar readings are even better than we hoped. The star is not just stable, it's actually stronger than before. The fusion reaction will burn for millions of years. How is that possible? Asked Dr. Velkaroth, who had been studying the readings with amazement. The human fusion technology forced the star to burn more efficiently, Dr. Song explained. Combined with your stellar manipulation fields, we created a hybrid reaction that is more stable than natural stellar fusion. The communications officer Park Min-ho hurried over with an urgent message. Sirs, we're receiving transmissions from the surface of Zephyr Prime. The automated weather stations are coming back online. The polar ice caps are melting, and the atmospheric processors are beginning to function again. Kethfer's four eyes brightened for the first time in months. The homeworld is awakening. There's more, Park continued. We're receiving requests from the evacuation fleet. Thousands of ships are asking for permission to return home. Permission, granted, Kethfer said immediately. Tell them that Zephyr Prime lives again. Captain Zerlin was among the first to bring her ship back to the homeworld. As the last light descended through the atmosphere, she watched the landscape below change from white ice to green vegetation as the planet's natural systems began to recover. Captain, her communications officer reported, the capital city's emergency beacon is active. The main power grid is coming back online. Take us down, Zerlin ordered. Let's go home. The landing pad in the capital city was partially flooded with melted ice, but it was functional. As Zerlin stepped onto the surface of her homeworld, she felt the warmth of the sun on her scales for the first time in years. Around her, other Zephyrians were emerging from their ships, many of them falling to their knees and touching the ground with their hands. We're home, whispered Lieutenant Morthic, tears streaming down his scaled face. We're actually home. In space, above the planet, the human and Zephyrian fleets worked together to coordinate the massive return of the refugee population. Chief Engineer Choi Yun-ha found herself working with Silthara to repair the damaged orbital stations that would be needed to support the returning millions. Your people have given us more than our lives, Silthara said as they worked. You have given us hope. The belief that impossible things can be made possible. That's what we do, Choi replied with a smile. We find ways to make the impossible happen. Lieutenant Commander Han Soo-jin was coordinating the defense patrols, where human gunships flew alongside Zephyrian vessels. The sight of the two different types of ships flying together had become a symbol of the new alliance between the species. Human Squadron Alpha 7, you are cleared for Patrol Sector 3, she announced over the communication system. Copy that, Command, came the reply from Lieutenant Park Ji-won, who had taken over Kim's squadron after the captain's death. We'll keep the home fires burning. Admiral Lee Hyen-woo received a message from Earth's command, asking about the missions. Status. He smiled as he wrote his reply. Mission accomplished. First contact successful. 1 dying star resurrected. 1 civilization saved. Humanity's reputation for doing impossible things remains intact. As the weeks passed, the partnership between humans and Zephyrians grew stronger. The two species shared technology, knowledge, and friendship. The Zephyrians learned about human determination and refusal to accept defeat. The humans learned about Zephyrian wisdom and their deep connection to the cosmos. Dr. Song Ji-hai and Dr. Velkaroth continued their research, developing new technologies that combined the best of both species knowledge. Their work would eventually lead to advances that would benefit the entire galaxy. We have learned something important, Admiral Kethfer said during the dedication ceremony for the joint memorial honoring those who died during the mission. Universe is not as cold and empty as we thought. There are those who will cross the void to help strangers, who will risk everything for people they have never met. Admiral Li Haiyanwu stood beside him, watching human and Zephyrian children play together in the rebuilt city below. That's what the galaxy needs more of. Not conquest or competition, but cooperation. Not war, but hope. The star of Zephyr Prime continued to burn brightly, its light a reminder that even the most impossible things could happen when people refused to give up.